Hey loves, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Faith, and today guys I'll be checking out Thomas Sowell as he explains the origin of the left war on white people in America. And you guys, I'm super excited as always. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, please consider subscribing, give this video a massive thumbs up, comment, share, and all that good stuff. And without much ado, let's see what Thomas Sowell has for us in this video.
These issues are very real. There's more issues here. Racism is a very serious problem in the United States. Take a look at the scholarly work on it. Say George Frederickson's study of white supremacy, comparative study. He concludes, I think, plausibly that the white supremacy in the United States was even more extreme and savage than in South Africa. Just think of our own history.
My concern is doing away with whiteness. Whiteness is a form of racial oppression, sure. The suggestion is that it is somehow possible to separate whiteness from oppression, and it is not. There can be no white race without the phenomenon of white supremacy. If you abolish slavery, you abolish slaveholders. In the same way, if you abolish racial oppression, you do away with whiteness. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity.
Your views are fairly well received in academia.
Yes, they're legitimate, not to say that everyone agrees, but sure. I could not point to any examples where it has provoked political censorship. Whiteness is an identity that arises entirely out of oppression. Whiteness is not a culture, it's not a religion, it's not a language, it's simply an oppressive social category.
Learn from history. The minority has never been able to control the majority. White Americans will soon be a minority, and that's great.
Intellectuals and race. If minorities were seen as the problem during the progressive era, the majority was seen as the problem during the liberal era that began after the Second World War. The central premise of liberal intellectuals for decades was that the racial problem was essentially inside the minds of white people. Explain that, Tom.
Well, what Gunnar Myrdal, who did the classic study on this, said was that you didn't even have to look at what blacks did. You could only look at what the whites were thinking, and this suggests that that these random thoughts from nowhere were the reason for the problems. The problem was that different groups of people have been different in substance all around the world and for centuries, and that blacks and whites in the United States are no exception to that. And it's very hard to have a society where people with very different cultures coexist.
Tom, you quote in Intellectuals and Race the famous black writer James Baldwin. He's writing in 1960, quote, "People in Harlem know they are living there because white people do not think they are good enough to live anywhere else."
Wow,
in a new housing project in Harlem, they naturally began smashing windows, defacing walls, and, you'll forgive me, but this is his language, urinating in the elevators. Close quote. Wow. What's wrong with his thinking?
Oh my gosh, you'd need a couple of hours. But it so happens I grew up in Harlem in the 1940s, 1950s, and you didn't expect to find people urinating in places where black people lived. In fact, there's very little attention given to the fact that the public housing of that era was radically different from the public housing of today. I remember we had a relative of ours got into some public housing. We were so proud because you had to have a certain character, a record, and so forth to get in. These were not places where you had dumping grounds for people who were at the bottom of the pile.
There was no less discrimination in the 40s and 50s in the minds of white people toward black people when you were growing up in Harlem.
That's right.
And yet Harlem, I was just thinking about this the other day, that great Duke Ellington classic, Take the A Train.
Yeah.
The A Train was and remains, as far as I know, the subway train up the west side of Manhattan.
Yes.
It's what white people used to get to Harlem. Harlem was an attractive place. It was a place of culture and excitement. So what was it then, if it wasn't in the minds of white people, what took place in Harlem in the 60s?
I think the 60s was a period of general irrationality, and wherever there's irrationality, there are people who know how to turn that irrationality to their benefit. And you began to get some very opportunistic leaders who then began to say things that they knew to be false, but which they knew would advance their careers.
Now, let me quote Intellectuals in Race one more time. Among the differences between the two eras, that is to say, the time you grew up in Harlem and the 60s, was that the intelligentsia, both black and white, became more prone in the later period to make excuses for moral squalor and barbaric behavior. Your words here. After such notions permeated the society, barbaric behavior and moral squalor became accepted norms within some segments, close quote. So you are not merely making the argument, I'm asking, that the liberal view that what was in their minds dictated the behavior of African Americans, that you're not merely making the view that liberals were mistaken, you're making the view that you're making the argument that they were culpable.
Yes. And as I point out at a few places in the book, you can go to England and see the very same pattern emerging, including this pattern where kids in school who are trying to do well get beaten up by other kids. Theodore Dalrymple is a doctor in Britain, and he writes about the kids who have to go to the hospital. They're so badly beaten up simply because they're doing well in school, and these are white kids, lower class in Britain. So you see the very same pattern, and all the things that are supposed to explain that pattern and explain it away among blacks are found among people who have none of those same factors. But what's the same in both places is that the intellectuals have told them that the world is unjust, that other people are keeping them down, that the fact that they don't have what other people have is somebody else's fault. And if you buy that vision, then of course there's no reason for you to do well in school, and you resent those who do well because they've bought into the enemy's way of thinking.
Wow. What a narrative. Oh my gosh. One thing I have to say is that once black people starts to accept the skin they are born in, then they'll be so liberated from this whole mentality of white supremacy, because this narrative has been passed down from generation to generation that the blacks are oppressed. So once a new generation comes out, they still carry on with that narrative, and they wouldn't want to work hard, thinking that everything will be handed to them on a platter of gold. Let me know what you guys think about what Thomas Sowell said about racism being lesser in the 90s than it is now. I don't think I totally agree with that, because now people are beginning to accept each other and even intermarrying each other. That's my own opinion. So I'm going to throw it to the floor. What do you guys think about what Thomas Sowell said in this video? Do you think people are being more racist today than they were in the past? Let me know all of your thoughts. This was such a beautiful, insightful video by Thomas Sowell. I love to hear him speak, and he is very, very intelligent. And kudos to him for putting out this beautiful piece out there for us to learn one or two things. It was such an insightful one, and I had fun reacting to Thomas Sowell. If you guys totally enjoyed watching, give this video a massive thumbs up, comment, share, and all that good stuff. And this is me officially signing out. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys.